Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville, fiber internet, security solutions, and voice in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Mallard Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. lawmg.com. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana Newsdesk. A small dairy farm has sprung up on Bloomington's west side. It's hoping to cater to consumers' desire for locally sourced products.
They want to know where their food comes from. And that helps create value to the farmer himself.
But small operations such as Twin Springs Creamery face challenges in an international market. Every year around Christmas, volunteers in Santa Claus, Indiana, answer thousands of letters from children addressed to jolly old St. Nick.
The world needs people who believe in something and in themselves and in things that are good.
And even more holiday mail flows through the post office for their unique postmark. And we take a look back at some of the biggest stories of the year. We'll have these stories plus the latest news from across the state right now on Indiana Newsdesk. Welcome to Indiana Newsdesk. I'm Joe Wren. A new creamery will soon be opening in Bloomington, providing a fresh local option for on-the-shelf dairy. According to its owner, Twin Springs Creamery will be filling a gap that has existed in the area for some time. Clayton Baumgarth spoke with the business as well as other experts in the industry to learn about the challenges faced by dairy farmers in Indiana.
These cows will consume 25 gallons of water apiece. Per day.
On the far western reaches of Bloomington sits Twin Springs Creamery, a new dairy farm that aims to have grade A pasteurized products on local store shelves in the very near future. At the moment, Twin Springs has 4 Jersey cows, Rosie, Luna, Skittles, and Genevieve, that will make the company's product line of plain and flavored milks and yogurts. It's no small feat in today's industry climate. Many dairy farmers at this scale send the milk or cream from their cows to a separate operation to be processed before being sold on the market. James Farmer, one of the owners of Twin Springs Creamery, says they plan to do all the milking and processing on site.
We were able to look at smaller scale equipment like this 100-gallon vat pasteurizer, and there are different companies that manufacture these, and so 30 years ago, it may not have been as possible to find the equipment to do it at this scale.
It takes a lot to get an operation like this off the ground. There's agencies to report to, such as the Board of Animal Health, that require on-site testing equipment, the devices that do the milking of the cows, and all of the stainless steel vats to keep the product sanitary. Farmer says that this venture was made possible thanks to an $85,000 grant from the Dairy Business Initiative.
They paid for the pasteurizer, the chart recorder, the chiller behind me, and a little bit more equipment, as well as helping with some marketing and getting a website developed. So without that, this part of the operation would not be possible.
Farmer has been interested in being a dairy farmer since he was 8 years old.
I remember going to Martha Miller's Jersey farm on New Garden Road as a kid, and then I grew up judging cows in 4-H and showing cows in 4-H and then FFA and being part of that.
And to his knowledge, Twin Springs will be the only grade A dairy facility in Monroe and the surrounding counties. And other than one facility in Brown County, he's not wrong. In an industry that has gone through as much consolidating in the last few decades as dairy has, this is by no means uncommon. According to Steve Obert, Executive Director for Indiana Dairy Producers, Indiana is the 15th highest dairy producing state in the country.
We produce a little over 4 million pounds of milk a day. That leaves our state borders for other processing.
Obert says there are just under 700 grade A dairy farms in the state. He also says that a majority of the farms work through what is called a farmer-owned cooperative to sell their products. Prairie Farms, O'Brien, and Dairy Farmers of America are all examples of farmer-owned cooperatives. In these business arrangements, farmers act as both shareholders and contractors that must meet certain quotas in order to get their equity.
The profits of the cooperative, as well as some maybe some deductions off of your own milk check get put into that equity account. And then so that the cooperative has money to operate with.
Historically, these co-ops have caused a sort of hollowing out of the industry, where smaller farms have a hard time being profitable if not aligned with a large processor. But Obert says that businesses like Twin Springs Creamery are a part of the latest development in the industry, where an interest in locally sourced dairy products is allowing smaller, private operations to be successful. Twin Springs is one of 37 dairy farms in the state operating in this way.
They want to know where their food comes from. And that helps create value to the farmer himself, because he can sell, he's basically creating value on who he is and how he does things. And that's beginning a little more popular.
Another problem the industry has been dealing with involve our neighbors to the north, Canada. Since the 70s, Canada has operated on a quota system which tightly controls how much dairy farmers can produce and limits imports through tariffs. On one hand, the control helps stabilize income for Canadian dairy farmers. On the other, dairy-producing countries like New Zealand and the United States feel it's an unfair way to shelter the industry. The U.S. has attempted to open up trade with varying degrees of success involving the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement. After winning one case with little change on Canada's part, the National Milk Producers Federation just concluded its second USMCA case on the grounds that Canada's quota system doesn't line up with USMCA responsibilities.
We worked quite closely with the U.S. government, that's U.S. Department of Agriculture and the Trade Representative's Office, to encourage them to bring a second case and focus quite strongly on the need for a ruling across these various problematic measures.
The USMCA rules in favor of Canada in that case, and now the U.S. and National Milk Producers Federation are attempting to plan their next steps.
I think what we have been really encouraged by is the statements from both the administration and bipartisan members of Congress saying this can't be the end of the line. Like, this decision simply makes no sense.
Morris says the issue is an important one because it causes incrementally downward pressure on milk prices and losses for everyday farmers.
When we see a trading partner that should be as law-abiding and positive a one as Canada is, given the U.S.-Canadian relationship, basically thumbing its nose at its obligations to us, well, that's pretty concerning.
Being able to export dairy products to Canada would eventually raise the prices of these goods and allow more people like James Farmer to make a proper living dairy farming without having to bring in a third-party co-op. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Clayton Baumgarth.
You can look for Twin Springs Creamery products at the Bloomington Winter Farmers Market, the Bloomington Farm Stop Collective, and eventually Blooming Foods. Well, Bloomington, Columbus, and Terre Haute will all have new administrations come January 1st. Bloomington Mayor John Hamilton and Columbus Mayor Jim Linnop both chose not to seek re-election after 2 terms. In Terre Haute, Duke Bennett lost his bid for re-election after serving 4 terms in office. I sat down with all 3 this month and asked them what it means to be a mayor.
I think a lot of it's got to do with how much they care and sort of realize that Columbus can at times be a really special place, be really, kind of a neat place to raise your family, to just to spend your time. I mean, we have a great set of amenities here locally. People tend to take care of the place.
I think just rallying around those down times helped us, reach some really high, lofty goals that I set. And so when you kind of look back across it, we've had a lot of things that have happened that who would have ever thought? I mean, you can't write a script for this kind of a job. And so I think it's really important for this, whoever's in this job, to make sure they remember that you work for the people and the people have a lot of needs, and you got to make sure you meet those goals.
One person described being mayor as being everyone's neighbor. You are like the neighbor to everyone in the community, which means you get to know what they care about, you get to know what they worry about, you get to know what they hope for. And one of the great things about this job is you get to try to help people accomplish their objectives, create more opportunity for people, create more success for people. And Bloomington is a high ambition community. We are not as diverse as we think we are sometimes, and we need to really work hard on being a more inclusive community. But it's a great community. I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. I wouldn't want to be mayor anywhere else. The future is really bright, I think, for Bloomington. I think our trajectory is good, and I hope the momentum continues.
While Linnop and Hamilton say they don't have any plans right now, Bennett was appointed this week as Indiana's next executive director of the Office of Community and Rural Affairs. The job will begin when his term expires at the end of this year. Well, we're joined now by Clayton Baumgarth for more headlines from around the state. Hi, Clayton.
Hey, Joe. Thanks for having me. Governor Eric Holcomb says the sale of U.S. steel to a Japanese company reflects the need to remain competitive in a global marketplace. But lawmakers at both the state and federal level expressed disappointment at the company's sale to Nippon Steel Corporation. U.S. Steel has 3 facilities in Indiana, including its largest manufacturing plant, which is in Gary.
You have to be able to compete on a global stage if you want to stay in business and grow.
Holcomb says he's still sifting through the finer details of what the sale will mean for contracts U.S. Steel has in place with the United Steelworkers Union. Language barriers present a challenge for Hoosiers trying to keep up to date on their vaccine schedules, but one immunization group is using new grant funding to expand the services with additional languages. The Indiana Immunization Coalition was one of 10 groups across the country to receive a grant from pharmaceutical company GSK. The organization wants to develop educational materials in additional languages to make vaccination information accessible to more people.
I think reaching new communities and making sure we're really thoughtful in our approach so that these immigrant and migrant families don't feel left out of the system, if we can make them feel welcome and that this is a safe space.
Robertson says IIC wants to use part of the funding to provide interpreters for multiple languages. Student climate advocates at Indiana University worry the university is lagging behind on implementing its climate action plan. The plan was approved in September, but can't move forward until the individual campuses form their own climate committees. Though IU has a plan to become carbon neutral by 2040, President of Students for a New Green World, Soha Vora, says the plan itself seems purposefully vague.
All of those goals and objectives and deadlines were pushed off onto an implementation committee that hasn't been formed yet.
Vora worries this will put the university's overall goal out of reach, but IU's chief sustainability officer says all campuses will have to finalize those committees by mid-January. IU Health Bloomington earned a high-performing review in maternity care for the U.S. News and World Report for the 2nd year in a row. The annual review looks at factors like C-section rates, newborn complication rates, breast milk feeding rates, and vaginal birth after a previous C-section delivery. IU Health Bloomington's Director of Prenatal and Pediatrics, Nikki Binnick, says the hospital is focusing on outcomes of hypertension and cardiac issues in pregnancy. It also is working to collect data for equitable health care.
Being able to sort of track our racial and ethnic disparities is really important to equitable healthcare delivery. So that's something that we've really focused on in the last couple of years to ensure that we're giving the same care to everyone.
The U.S. News and World Report received data from 680 hospitals, and fewer than half received a high-performing review for maternity care. Indiana's Medicaid program will cost about $1 billion more in the current state budget than previously expected due to an error in the estimates lawmakers used to write the budget earlier this year. The underestimate is centered largely on home and community-based long-term care services. State Medicaid leaders say the flow of up-to-date information wasn't good enough when they gave lawmakers the funding estimate in April. And Joe, the state will have to dip into its budget reserves to make up funding shortfall in the coming budget.
Sure, Brennan will keep on top of that for us in this upcoming year.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk. Volunteer letter writing elves and postal workers spring into action at Christmas time in Santa Claus, Indiana. And we visit an exhibit on the IU campus celebrating 100 years of 16mm film and how it revolutionized the industry. These stories and more right here on Indiana Newsdesk.
I have always believed that people are at the heart of every story we tell.
Any story or interview that makes people who watch it say, you know, I hadn't thought of it in that way. That, for me, is gold.
I like to be able to leave the viewer with some sort of emotion, whether it's outrage, whether it's someone overcoming long odds, telling a big story through an individual story.
What makes the NewsHour different is that we have time to be thoughtful about the stories that we tell, the voices that we intend to elevate.
I know the role that good journalism plays in making all of us feel more connected to each other, in helping all of us understand each other a little bit better. I see this as a mission, and I see this as a service.
Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. The IU McAllis School is hosting an exhibit celebrating 100 years of 16mm film. The exhibit, A Century of 16mm Film, aims to educate people on how the format has evolved since it was released in 1923. Isabella Vesperini has this report.
There are 62 cameras and projectors in the exhibit dating back to 1923. The majority come from Alan Lewis, the head of preservation and film archiving at the National Archives.
Before 1923, all that existed and had existed for the previous 28 to 30 years was 35mm motion picture film capture on enormously huge cameras that were hard to move, that really, it was expensive. Earlier formats were also on a nitrate film base, which was flammable and dangerous and killed people.
The invention of 16mm film allowed kids to project their own films using Mickey Mouse reels, for example. The Bell & Howell Filmosound Utility Kit came with a speaker, projector, and amplifier, weighing 79 pounds and costing around $369. This kit was used often at home, churches, schools, and clubs.
So 60mm was the first time it was affordable, the first time regular people could finally shoot just their home movies, right? Or amateur filmmakers could afford to make films. So it changed how everyone could ever record film and moving images ever.
Eastman Kodak sold the first 16mm filmmaking equipment, the Cine Kodak, for $335. Ford's Model T sold for $298 at the same time. As 16mm film became more popular among other companies, cameras became more affordable.
I know compared to your phone, it's not tiny, but compared to like a 35mm camera that doesn't move, that's pretty great.
Projectors and cameras were also designed to get Army footage for war films, despite being very bulky and heavy. The exhibit also features a table where you can look at old strips of film through a magnifying glass. In 16mm film, there are 24 frames per second. That means 400 feet of 16mm reel produces about 10 minutes of footage. Stolce says she's concerned about losing content that is being made.
For long-term digital preservation, people won't be checking their files for digital rot. They're not running fixity checksums to make sure their files are okay, not storing in 3 different locations. And then in the next 10 years, MOV may not be the format, right? So you're always going to be migrating films.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Isabella Vesperini.
The exhibit will be open through March. There is no admission fee. Well, mail a letter in December to Santa Claus, Indiana, and you're likely to receive a response written by Santa. Reporter Ethan Sandwise visited the small southern Indiana town that receives, stamps, and sends a massive volume of holiday letters.
Every year, tens of thousands of letters like these are answered by volunteers in Santa Claus, Indiana. The tradition dates back over 90 years.
It wasn't posed, wasn't it?
Today there's only 3 volunteers in the old post office, or elves as they prefer to be called. They've been at it for hours, surrounded by piles of cards and envelopes. Last year their small team answered over 23,000 letters.
We can have 14 people in there answering letters, and that's it. We can't have any more. So we try not to overschedule, but right now we really need help.
Cook has been penning Christmas letters in the old post office since World War II, save for a 10-year break when she worked as a nurse in St. Louis. Her father, Jim Yellig, began writing letters with Postmaster James Martin in 1930.
We've been told that the postmaster started answering letters in 1914. When my dad came back in 30, he saw how busy that made the postmaster, and he started helping him.
Cook says the elves use 4 form letters depending on the mail they receive.
The letters are dear, dear friend, dear little friend, and Merry Christmas. One of them says, sometimes I can't give you everything you want, so we try to find a letter that suits the child's letter.
Without a team of reindeer, sending letters worldwide is expensive. According to the Santa Claus Museum, postage alone costs over $20,000, which is covered by donations. Despite the massive investment of labor and money, Cook says she'll be back next year, just as she has for the last 63.
The world needs people who believe in something and in themselves and in things that are good. And I think that's what we do.
Yes. Okay.
Across town, another holiday tradition brings thousands of letters to the town's new post office. These holiday writers want to send friends and loved ones letters with Santa Claus, Indiana's unique holiday postmark.
And it just has become such a huge part of the community and what we do here in the town. If you didn't do it, you might be run out of town.
The holiday postmark turns 40 this year. The additional workload requires Bailey to borrow clerks from neighboring offices.
You mentioned last year the number of cards that you postmarked.
Yeah, it was almost 123,000, just cards and letters. That doesn't include, larger envelopes or packages that got the postmark.
The special stamp is designed by a local high school student and approved by the U.S. Postal Service in D.C. Unlike standard postmarks, it has to be applied by hand.
And nothing liquid fragile. Yeah, there we go.
Customers travel from around the country to stamp their letters in person, but most will mail them in.
If they don't make it here in person, they do have the option to mail them. So we get lots of packages in daily addressed to the postmaster. Then we open and their cards are inside, and then we take them out and cancel them for them.
Bailey retires next year, which means the daunting job will fall on a new postmaster. But like Cook, she says the extra work is worth it.
It just brings a smile to their face. I mean, it's just so neat. It's Christmas, you're getting a Christmas card, and it was postmarked from Santa Claus, Indiana.
For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Ethan Sandweiss.
The Santa Claus Post Office uses its postmark from December 1st to the 24th. The elves respond to letters received by the 16th. Well, with this being our final Indiana News Desk of the year, videographer Devin Ridgway put together this piece on some of the top stories we brought you in 2023.
It improves walking and bicycling by providing this reliable corridor for people to use where they will feel safer and more comfortable.
It's pretty obvious that you had a woman that was suffering, getting worse, showing serious medical issues, and that they just let her die.
If you were properly monitoring an incarcerated person, they don't lose 44 pounds. They don't lose a quarter of their body weight in 20 days.
Very few states give small folks an opportunity to both produce the product and sell it to the public, and being able to do it all in one spot was what was really important to us.
This is a program that allows for any kid, any size, any shape to be able to come and find success.
Its impact is really global, despite it just like a small borderline region of Ukraine. It's just like fight is going on.
There was no question that this is somebody who would have made a great mark. But just imagine where she might have gone had she lived.
I will not sit down until my question is answered. When were these trucks accepted?
When were the truck?
Accepted, and have they already been dumped?
They were accepted today and they were dumped today.
It is a more humane place, I think, partly because of the community's involvement there.
I love going to the games, and I love Sarah Scalia.
We'll regroup, and then the goals will remain the same: to win another Big Ten championship, to get to a Final Four.
I never dreamed I would be elected mayor of this city that I very surprisingly fell in love with on a cross-country bicycling trip.
We, as the governing body, need to put limits on the access to tax dollars we allow Indiana University to garner by denying such funds to be directed towards Kinsey Institute.
It's too late to go back to the legislature and say, no, we don't want this bill. But I believe strongly that there are other ways to do that other than separating the institute.
It wouldn't take much for anybody to overpower a teacher if they knew that you had a gun on you.
I've had things thrown at me, noises all the way around me. I know that they've been around me, but I haven't had that actual visual sighting. So that's what I'm always chasing.
With all his adrenaline, he kicked down the door, and there was a couple people in there, and he said, "I've got an infant. Do you have a basement? We need to find shelter."
They just want the homeless gone, out of sight, out of mind. Okay, where they're going to go?
You can sit there and fidget, just tighten your belts in the line-up shoe, but as soon as you go out there, it all just kind of goes away, and just you're focused on one thing, and that's winning.
I'm worried about it in who is going to be in this race, because we've got to turn things around.
Even after we say
there are clinics available to you. We can help. It's okay. There's still kind of the response of, but I don't know how I'm going to pay for it.
I hope you hear my voice clearly and loudly tonight as I state clearly, the superintendent has chosen not to listen to the heart of these high schools, which are the teachers and students, and therefore must be removed.
People may look at it later and say, hey, I didn't get to weigh in on that. I want to weigh in on that. Sometimes it's too late, sometimes it's not. And government tries to accommodate that as best we can.
Defense! Yes, defense! 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 Defense!
That's the end of this program, but our work continues online as we cover the news throughout the week at WTIUnews.org. Have a great holiday. Join us for more in 2024.
Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by Smithville, fiber internet, security solutions, and voice in Southern Indiana. More information at smithville.com. Mallard Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. lawmg.com. IU Center for Rural Engagement, extending IU Bloomington resources to improve Hoosier lives in partnership with communities and organizations. rural.indiana.edu. And by WTIU members. Thank you.